Recently, Games Workshop has released a bunch of new detachments for Necrons and Space Marines as part of their 500 Worlds expansion. This includes one detachment which has got a lot of people talking and many people messaging me about how it might be the hot new way to run Centurions that isn't some form of Raven Guard team teleporting nonsense. I've had so many people messaging me about this that I decided to make this video so I don't have to keep repeating myself over and over. Also, it is a genuinely interesting topic. This is the Orbital Assault Force detachment, which allows you to pick up to 3 units in your army and give them the Deep Strike keyword, as well as a bonus to your wound roll on the turn that you set up any unit on the battlefield. First of all, I'm not going to point fingers, but I'm just going to say that when I designed my homebrew detachment for my homebrew Space Marine Successor chapter, this was basically the detachment rule I came up with. Except mine was a little bit sillier and more random and more attuned to the Screaming Ravens. I'm not saying that Games Workshop copied me, but I will be speaking to my lawyer and filing legal action for copyright theft for my totally original idea that no one else could have possibly come up with by themselves independently. See you in court. Adding Deep Strike to a unit that doesn't normally get Deep Strike is extremely powerful. Deep Strike allows you to deploy a unit from reserves onto the battlefield anywhere outside of 9 inches from an enemy unit, rather than the strategic reserves rule, which means you have to come in from a board edge. This freedom allows you to do some really sneaky things like dropping down powerful shooting right next to your target, or using rapid ingress to get behind a ruin safely for a big assault in your next turn. In fact, giving Centurions Deep Strike was one of the things that made them so popular at the start of 10th edition. Uriel Ventress used to be able to give Centurions the Deep Strike keyword, which mitigated their main weakness, which is that they move at the speed of a lethargic snail. After Uriel Ventress was nerfed to no longer be able to target his ability on Centurions, most people left them on the shelf, despite the fact that they got a huge points buff as compensation. But Shadowmark Talon proved that not having Deep Strike really isn't a problem when Centurions could just come onto the board edge and shoot anything, anywhere with their ridiculous range. Now, I say that Shadowmark Talon proved that. It did for most boring and unimaginative people, but I've been bringing Centurions on from the sidelines for months because it is indeed extremely powerful. Being able to drop into the middle of the board isn't really that much of an advantage when you can just walk on from the side of the battlefield, point at something in the distance, say, perish, and watch it die. With Shadowmark Talon and Centurions nerfed, those meta-chasing hangers-on have finally left me alone to play with my toys by myself. I no longer have to hold on to the anxiety of good players using my trademark unit, resulting in them getting nerfed, and I get to hold on to that feeling of smug superiority by being the only Centurion user left in the world. But with this new detachment coming in, with the potential of giving 3 units of Centurions Deep Strike, is that the new way to actually run Centurions? Is this the answer to my search for the best detachment to run 36 Centurions? And has Shadowmark Talon finally been dethroned as the de facto detachment for carrying Centurions? No! I actually think that Centurions are a pretty bad choice for this attachment, and not just for the lists that I play, which includes many units of them. Apart from giving them Deep Strike, the detachment doesn't really give much else. And also, I think there are way better options to utilize this new detachment that doesn't involve Centurions at all. Let's get the easy one out of the way first. My 36 Centurions list. Yes, I can give 3 units of Centurions Deep Strike, and with Deep Strike, they can be put into reserves as they don't need to go into strategic reserves, so the limit for units in Deep Strike is half your army, not 500 points. The big problem, however, is that I'm then starting the game with 4 units on the board, 3 squads of Centurions, and a character who is there just to make sure I don't get fined. So my turn 1 is going to be absolutely brutal. I'll have no way to get any board pressure whatsoever, or really get any secondaries done. My best option is to Deep Strike Assault Centurions and then rapid ingress them so I can potentially get a 5-inch charge. That's it. And that's not really that strong when my opponent could just flood the board and give me limited places to drop. Also, the other part of this detachment rule is functionally useless because outside of the missiles on the Devastators, everything I use is twin-linked, so I get wound rerolls anyway. Without any of the enhancements being available due to points and the stratagems being mediocre to unusable, it just doesn't provide much of an advantage that can't be gained from more useful tech in something like Gladius, Shadowmark Talon, Forge Valley Seekers, or the Black Templar one that people tell me about that allows you to advance in action. I can't remember which one. Or Deathwatch, for some reason, again, people keep telling me about it, but I can't remember why it's good. But that analysis is only for a clearly very silly list, and that army is so janky that it's really not much of an indictment on the detachment if it doesn't work. But what about Centurions in general? Is adding Deep Strike to Centurions in a more standard list actually useful? Well, technically yes, it is, but the main problem is that Deep Strike doesn't actually solve the problem Centurions have, which is movement. Sure, you can Deep Strike into the middle of the board or an open area that presents itself anywhere, not just a board edge, but once you drop down, that's it. Assault Centurions benefit more because they don't have to foot slog anymore, but Devastator Centurions probably want to be on the board edge anyway. And the whole idea with Shadowmark Talon, the whole crux of that detachment, is that you can bring them back up and down repeatedly, which is the main power of that kind of list. For my list specifically, what you lose out on by moving away from Shadowmark Talon is absolutely obscene the amount you lose. You lose free uppy downy, pullback shoot and charge, extra power from range, and extra defense from range. And my list only has one set of Assault Centurions, so the other two units I picked for Deep Strike would be either one of my jump units that already has Deep Strike or my Blade Guard, which already infiltrate. Shan and Shrike just pair too well with my regular tournament event list. Even after the nerfs, I've had to remove a unit of intercessors, which sucks, but otherwise my list is exactly the same. And the main tactic of bouncing those walking tanks with guns for hands around the board to delete huge swathes of my opponent's army every turn does not work in the Orbital Assault Force. But even 18 Centurions is a weird skew list that most people aren't going to play. So what about Centurions in general? For those players looking to take a more sensible number of Centurions, like 3, 6, or even 9, also known as cowards, is it worth taking this detachment and buffing up those Centurions? No, not really. You see, there is a major flaw with this detachment that I think people are overlooking when they ask me if Centurions are a good fit for gaining Deep Strike. I mean, there's the minor flaw of the detachment just not being that good. I mean, in terms of strats and enhancements, they're all fine, and you can certainly do some interesting stuff with them, but they don't really give much of an extra oomph compared to other options that Space Marines have. And Space Marines have a lot of goddamn options, Jesus Christ. The major flaw is that this rule states that when you select a number of Adeptus Astartes units, excluding Titanic units. In other words, why would you want to give Deep Strike to Centurions when you could Deep Strike a fucking Land Raider? Is this the strongest detachment ever? No, not really. But is this one of the most fun, silly, and exciting detachments they've ever released? Holy crap, yes it is. This is going to be a shocking statement coming from me, but Centurions are the boring option. There are so many way more interesting ideas and stupid units that you could play around with that would be far more fun and utilize the Deep Strike far better. 3 Land Raider Redeemers, Storm Ravens, Dreadnoughts, Repexes, Vindicators, Hammerful Bunkers. The list of units you could put Deep Strike on is insane and way better than basically any infantry unit, especially with those vehicles that you can just transport those units in. Why would you give Centurions Deep Strike when you can put 3 Centurions in a Brutalis and a Deep Striking Storm Raven? Yes, please! Imagine dropping down 3 Land Raider Redeemers 9 inches away from the enemy, cooking them alive with the flamers which get re-rolling ones to wound, then having 3 Centurions or other heavy infantry popping out to dish out some real pain, and then being able to use the more vehicle-centric stratagems as well. Or how about using Rapid Ingress on a Brutalis Dreadnought and then running something down, or smashing a Repulsor Executioner into your opponent's backside and dumping out a bunch of Blade Guard with a Judicia to decapitate anything that dares to turn around and deal with the threat. This detachment is great, but not for Centurions specifically. It's great because it allows you to take units and give them a rule they normally don't have access to, which greatly increases their power and utility. Centurions and other heavy weapons inventory with range don't necessarily need that kind of flexibility to drop anywhere on the board. And in fact, that even might be a hindrance if they get too close to the enemy and get charged and they don't have a way of falling back without penalty, which is why Shadowmark Talon is so fucking busted. These kinds of detachments are great. They might not be the strongest, but they are the most interesting, and they keep the game and many units that might be unutilized fresh and exciting. Vanguard Spearhead just allowing you to uppy downy Centurions gives that unit a whole new way of playing, and you don't need to follow the meta if you just want to try something stupid that you've noticed, because that surprise curveball is going to trip up a lot of players. I don't really know how I'll deal with seeing 3 Land Raiders dropping into my face, except to hopefully shoot them before they shoot me, but that's also a lot of tank to chew through whilst the enemy racks up points and blocks me from getting to their squishy targets. Or maybe I'm completely wrong and actually having 3 units of Centurions with Deep Strike is the most broken thing in the game. I'm not that smart and I'm bad at the game, but if I have the chance to give something Deep Strike, I'm going to go with something far more absurd. That's why I really like this game. The silly stuff you could pull off with some weird combos and the ability to build around your favorite units to do some crazy jank. I highly recommend just exploring and having fun with stuff to see what cool thing you can come up with. It might be stronger than you think, and even if it's not that strong, you're not a pro player. Neither are most people. It's probably going to do okay. Let me know what you think about this attachment, and let me know what silly combos you like to use. And as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this, go ahead and like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Become a member or patron like all of these lovely people. Buy my merch, and I'll see you next time. Or else.